I think the model worked because it clearly defined the mission of the congregation, and it defined very clearly what commitment to the model looked like. Who was here for the Seder? Yeah, a lot of people. The room was really full. There was a table that went all the way down the length of the room. And when some people came a little later, we had to set up another table over there off the side. There were a lot of children present. That was really wonderful. It was an amazing intergenerational experience, like being part of a huge extended family. The thing, in a way, you can't find anywhere else but a congregation. Some people who were here on Friday, members of the congregation, some were not. We had a bunch of guests. It was really an amazing evening. And all of us together, we were fulfilling actually the purpose of our congregation. Providing an open, caring community, welcoming people of diverse backgrounds who come seeking spiritual, personal, and intellectual growth, creating a place where adults and children are taught, nurtured, loved, and given freedom to explore and define individual beliefs, while we affirm and promote Unitarian Universalist values of peace, social justice, and religious tolerance for all people. Well, who was at the Seder again? Who was it? Now, while you were here Friday night, did you think you were doing all of that? Yes, okay. Some people actually did. Yay. Yeah. Sometimes we don't even think of it when we're doing what we're here to do because it's what we do. And that was the most wonderful thing of all to me. You know, what's it mean to create a place where people of all ages can learn and be nurtured and loved and given freedom and explore their individuality and be part of a community? What's that mean? Well, I think what that means is kind of what it means to be a member of a congregation. So, what's it mean to be a member of the congregation to you? Not a rhetorical question. Go ahead, think about it for a second. What's it mean to be a member of this congregation to you? Not what it means in our bylaws, not what it's supposed to mean. What's it mean to you? It's important because how we define this defines our relationship to this place and to each other, and really has an impact on how interdependent we are and might become. Take a minute. I'm going to watch. Take a minute and share with each other what you were thinking about what it means to be a member here. Go ahead.
No matter what your family situation is, stay in life. Keep that. What does this place mean?
It never ceases to amaze me that when I ask people in a Unitarian Universalist congregation to talk to each other for a minute, I could pretty much just go have my coffee now. But that's awesome because most of you turned right away to somebody else and started sharing. Again, an exact lived reality of what we say we're about. It's kind of amazing. Did any of you actually talk about being in agreement with the purposes of the congregation, signing the membership book, and making and fulfilling a financial commitment of record? If anyone talked about that, raise your hand. And I don't do this just as a joke. Think about that, because what I just read is what's in our bylaws of what makes someone a member. And I'm going to bet, I couldn't hear everybody's conversation individually, but I would almost really put money on this, that you all talked about relationship and meaning and values, and not about a financial commitment or signing your name in a book. Because according, the bylaw thing, our congregation, and really most UU congregations, we don't really ask too much of people. I'm going to ask you to hold that because I'm not so sure that's a good thing. I don't know, but there's a lot of things to think about with that. Because what if we asked of everybody what you all talked about? Can we? Do we? How? A story to start some reflection. I went on a fascinating field trip in 2011 to this huge conference at a very big mega church outside Dayton, Ohio, the Ginghamsburg Church in Tip City, Ohio. My sister lives in Dayton, Ohio. I had never heard of this church. It's like 12 miles from our house. But I probably should have, given what I learned there. There was a group of 5 Unitarian Universalist ministers from Texas, where I was at the time, and we were all into missional congregations. How does our congregation serve the world? How do we get out there? And this conference was said to be the best of its kind. It was called Save the World, and they did it at that time every October. I think they do it in April now. So we called them up and asked, can 5 Unitarian Universalist clergy from Texas get your congregational group discount for registering? The person said they'd get back to us. Eventually, they did let us. They were so interested that Unitarian Universalists wanted to come to this. They're like, sure, give them the discount, let them come. And we actually got to meet with a pastor and everything. It was really interesting. So we got there, and we discovered that Ginghamsburg, being a Methodist congregation, is a fairly middle-of-the-road Christian congregation in many ways. They weren't hyper-progressive, but they certainly were not fundamentalists and hateful and excluding. Kind of your middle-of-the-road Methodism that, I don't know, maybe some of you might have even grown up in. And I learned a lot that weekend. But one of the long-lasting lessons I took away was, what does it mean to be a member of a congregation? What do we ask of each other? Ginghamsburg was a floundering little country church of about 100 people outside Dayton, Ohio in 1979 when a new pastor named Mike Slaughter arrived. And he decided to grow the congregation by focusing on a mission to serve the world around them. 31 years later, when I attended that conference, Pastor Slaughter was starting to get ready for retirement. But Ginghamsburg then had a 75-acre campus and averaged over 4,500 people worshiping at their various services every weekend. And the reason for this growth wasn't, in a very real sense, their focus on mission. Mission, if you look on their website, still there, to serve the poor and disenfranchised in their neighborhood and in the world. And they were good at it. Slaughter and his church became known as early innovators and early adopters of small group ministry, the church media reformation, and cyber ministry. When I visited, and this was back in 2011, they had, over the last handful of years, invested over $4 million in sustainable humanitarian efforts in Darfur. They had sent over 50 teams of volunteers to New Orleans to help with post-Katrina rebuilding efforts. They operated not one, not two, but three independent 501c3 nonprofit organizations. One was focused on outreach to the community and general service. One was a counseling center that provided actual therapy to anybody regardless of ability to pay. And the other was the Dream Builders Clubhouse, an after-school center that did a number of different things. And these organizations served over 50,000 people in the area every year. The congregation at that time had received awards for outstanding community service from George W. Bush and Bill Clinton. U.S. News and World Report named it one of the 50 best churches in America, and Mike Slaughter one of the 50 best Christian leaders in America. And I would learn while I was there that weekend that part of what made all that possible was how they thought about membership, strangely enough, and how membership was connected to their mission. Even though their average Sunday attendance, weekend attendance, was around 5,000, they only had about 500 members. And one reason for this was that the requirement levels of being a member were extraordinary. Their membership process required a multi-session, multi-week class. I looked on their website this week. The next one is 6 Sundays from May 19th to June 30th, 9 to 10 a.m. before service. Membership requires a stewardship pledge of at least 10% of your net income. You must agree to be a member of, join, and regularly attend a small group ministry. And they have dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens. Some of them, at the time I was there, had been meeting for 25 years. And you must sit for an extensive interview with a member of the pastoral staff about how you would be of service. Not to the congregation, to the world around you. You needed a plan of how you would put your faith into action in your life. It was part of what the class was for, to help you think about all of this stuff. But still, can you imagine a Unitarian Universalist congregation even hinting at this level of membership requirement? No, but it worked for them. It produced a thriving and effective congregation of thousands of people. Their models fascinated me for years because I couldn't really piece together what all the details were working together that really did make it work. Yes, they had a mission that was very outward focused, great, but there are a lot of congregations that have outward focused missions and they're dysfunctional and tiny and fall apart. And there's congregations that are big and thriving and don't serve the world hardly at all. So that alone can't be it. And the more and more I thought about it as the years went by, I think it was due to their membership process. And not because of the intense requirement level. I don't think that in itself is what did it. I think the model worked because it clearly defined the mission of the congregation. And it defined very clearly what commitment to the model looked like. And if that was for you, great. And if it wasn't, great. You can still come here and do everything. We don't mind. Awesome. You're welcome. Their model, consciously and intentionally, although they might not have called it this, developed long-haul people. There's a guy named Matthew Ferris who writes a blog I like called Gentleman Theologian. And a couple of years ago, he wrote a thing on membership and commitment. He says, I've been a member of a church that had no formal membership requirements whatsoever. One was not required to sign on to any covenant. But if you missed a Sunday, you would get a call that afternoon from one of the church elders saying, hey, we missed you this morning. You okay? How you doing? Not, why weren't you at church? Are you okay? What are you doing? We missed you. And it was from a Christian church. And it wasn't, you're going to go to hell, you missed church this morning. It was, we missed you. Are you okay? That's it. He explains that a formal type of membership isn't even necessary for a congregation to function or be successful, or for leaders to successfully lead it in its mission. He says, in many churches where a formal membership process exists, it represents an enigma. And I agree. Think about this. Sometimes congregations, ours, others, have non-members who do very member-like things all the time as a regular basis. Todd did them for 11 years, 14 years. What was it? 14 years. And that's not to pick on Todd or make a joke. It's just, that's just a lived reality. That's not special, right? This happens all the time, actually. And congregations also have members that never seem to give any money, never show up, and never get involved in anything. The membership is an enigma. It's like, what are we really talking about? Is it membership, or is it commitment to the community? Because it's commitment to the mission and the community that holds the group together, not whatever membership things you have in your bylaws, or if you have an 8-week class that everyone has to attend to, or, you know, you hold them up at gunpoint for 10% of their income or whatever it is, right? But the focus of commitment gets people going. And it makes me think that that's what my experience at Ginghamsburg actually showed me. It wasn't high membership requirements. It wasn't intense mission of service. It was that everyone had the same idea of commitment if you were a member. And even some of their non-members had a high level of commitment. They just weren't members. So much so, that level of commitment was so much that nothing could faze them or turn them away from their faith and involvement in the community, like the long haul people. I think that Ginghamsburg is successful because they clearly identified who they are, what they're about, and their mission, and what it specifically looked like to be committed to that mission and each other. Developing our commitment to each other and to the congregation is really talking about our interdependence. And interdependence requires trust. And trust requires healthy relationships. And healthy relationships require communication. Interdependence hinges on dependence. To be interdependent means that sometimes you are going to be dependent upon, and sometimes people will depend on you. And the reality with human beings is that the great majority of us are far better at being dependent upon than we are at admitting our need for others and needing to depend on them. We develop trust in relationship, and we develop close relationships by spending time together, conversing, talking, listening, having fun together, being here on Sunday morning together, sedering together. Our newest members and our oldest and our youngest, together. The more time we spend all together builds our healthy interdependent relationship. Any relationship where the participants are not spending quality time together drift apart. And that's true whether you're a member of a congregation or with your friends. Where's the friends who are still getting together, or your life partner? You'll drift apart if you're not spending that time connecting. And committee meetings are not connecting. Interdependence requires a mutuality. And that mutuality in relationship requires communication. Exchanging with each other, not just what we think and our opinions on stuff, but the reality of what's going on with us, how we feel. Why do we ask people when we gather in teams or groups or committees to light a chalice and do a check-in? That's not just so we can light a chalice because we're UUs. There's a much deeper reason for doing this. It's because when we do check-in, we're listening to each other and conversing relationally. If the whole conversation, the entire conversation, the bulk of conversation we have with each other is business and decision-making, then our relationships with each other become purely transactional. Accomplishing business, making a decision, moving on. If we make time to work on and share our feelings and our experiences as well as our thoughts, what's going on in our lives with each other, we deepen the connection, the relationship, the trust, and the bonds of interdependence can really get tight because we're allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, making space for vulnerability in the other, really forging that kind of connectedness that lets us all be in this together for the long haul. To show up, not just for coffee, but for Unitarian Universalism and each other. And how we're doing this relating to each other can be greatly influenced by how we think about what our congregation is. What is this community that we're relating to each other within and for and around? There are many different ways to think about what a congregation is, but it really does impact whether we're thinking about it consciously or not, how we're thinking about our relationships to each other, not just as members, but as people who are committed to each other and the idea of why we're here. A colleague of mine, David Pyle, put together a little list of the different ways congregations conceptually think of themselves. And some of the things he lists are congregation as fire department, where the congregation provides a needed service in the community, and the members commit to serving that need in the community together. Another is congregation as seminary, where the congregation is a training school for ministry, and members are training for ministry in formation and how to live their faith in the world and in the community. Congregation as community organizing center. Congregation is the center for social justice organizing, focused on one or more issues, and members are activists that coordinate their work with each other through the community. The congregation is community center. The congregation is the center for a community of members and friends and neighbors, and the building becomes the actual community center where the community events and programs happen. Congregation as social club. The congregation is a gather of dues-paying members who organize club activities, sometimes help with events, and leaving all the heavy lifting to the club elected officers. And all these models are just conceptual. And a congregation can certainly function in more than one of these ways at the same time. But most congregations really center on one more than the others. And I think there's some others I've encountered over my time in ministry. One is congregation as convenience store. It's in the neighborhood, and members from the community go get their various goods and services to meet their needs. And when the congregation is no longer meeting those needs or offering what they want, they just shop somewhere else. Congregation as temple or mystical community. The congregation is a center of religious practice, and members come for the ritual or prayers or meditation and carry on the other parts of their lives in other places. You could probably think of more models, but how we think of the community impacts how we relate to the community and each other. Some models require a deep sense of interdependence and interconnectedness and mutual relationship. Others less so. We don't have a creed in Unitarian Universalism, but we keep covenant. And our covenant is the promises about how we'll be in relationship to each other. But all too often, in many congregations, even when we put our covenant into lots of wordsmithed promises and long statements, we don't necessarily agree on what it means to live that out. What you all talked about when I asked you earlier about what it means to be here, that's your covenant. That's what you're promising to each other. And in the end, it's much more simple, I think, than a lot of us want to conceive of it as in Unitarian Universalism. Gail Geisenhainer, that reading, by the way, is from a sermon that was 20 minutes long she gave at General Assembly, which go watch it on the internet. It's amazing. But what she talks about is that when it got down to the relationality of those promises, it was through the good and the bad, through helping each other, no matter what occurred in the relationship, to promise to stick it out, work it out, find a way to get back, to be that example of love we say we are. That's something a congregation can do that I challenge you to find any other organization in our society that does it. That's where we live. And I wonder sometimes if there's things we can do to increase the sense of relatedness and interdependence we have with each other. We have Danbury in our name, but not everyone in this room lives in Danbury. Some of us don't even live in Connecticut. And if we're going to be in close relationship and contact to each other, maybe one of the things we can do is plot where all of us live on a map, and then contact all the little dots or pins that are closest to each other and encourage them and give them resources for getting together with each other closer to where you live on a regular basis, for meals, for fun, to go serve the community locally out where you are. One congregation I formerly served called this their neighborhoods program, because they drew from a big way around. We have grown in our religious education program here in the last year. And maybe one of the ways we can reimagine our connection is finding ways to make it easier for parents and families to connect, find out how we can provide more of what they need, encourage them to have relationship with each other beyond just being here on Sunday morning, finding ways that intergenerationally we can benefit from each other no matter what our age is chronologically. And I think again of our Seder on Friday night. There was a crowd, a group, a gaggle, 8, 10 children ran off finding the Afikomen all over the place, and they all got prizes. It was great. This is what builds us together, so that when we do finally hit a committee meeting, we are in such relationship with each other that it's easier for us to focus on where we're going, what decisions we need to make, what business we need to do. I once had a board that took a class called Serving with Grace. And when they were done, they found they would spend a half hour, 45 minutes of their board meeting checking in. And then they were able to get more done in that remaining hour than they had been in their 2-hour meetings anyway. Because all the needs to be heard, all the needs to have your ideas out there, all the other things that we want relationally that aren't happening while we're doing business have happened. And we're there in connection with people already. And then we move more quickly, because we're not trying to do the relating and figuring out and if it's safe to speak and all that kind of stuff at the same time. So what's it mean to be committed to each other and to the congregation? What's it mean to be a member? Maybe we can continue to have conversations about these things, because how we answer all these questions I've asked us to think about this morning really does determine where we're going next and how we're going to get there, and with who. What's it mean to us to create a place where people of all ages are taught, nurtured, loved, and given freedom to explore and define who they are and what they believe. What's it mean? Thanks a lot for watching this video. It would help me out a great deal if you liked the video to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this video with others, maybe ring that notification bell so you can be informed when we put out other videos like this. Check out my website and blog at tonylorenzen.com for even more resources that will open your mind, touch your heart, and inspire your spirit.